For those who have texted in and asked, is that in fact Rob Cameron from his latest album? No, it is not. Indeed, it's a chap called Nathan Lay, who is a member of various opera groups, including Opera Australia. He is a baritone, and as coincidence would have it, Rob, you'll never guess who's on the telephone again.
Don't tell me.
We've got Nathan Lay. Hello, Nathan.
How you going?
Good morning, Nathan. I apologise for that last little bit at the end, but when you started to sing, I said to Neil, geez, I'd like to sing with Nathan Lay, and I got a chance to do it for the last couple of seconds, and I appreciate that.
Not many people realise just what a singer Rob is, and you'll notice I didn't use an adjective.
Great the public with your talents there.
That was nice. Nice to share that moment, my friend. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us this morning on what is a very special day on the Australian historical calendar, which we've been talking about for most, but you've taken it to a whole new level, and you've made music about the day. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about Nathan Lay and his introduction and love of music.
Sure. Well, look, thanks for having me today. I think, well, technically I'm a Victorian. I live in New South Wales these days.
Never mind.
I work full-time for Opera Australia. But I grew up in regional Victoria in the Latrobe Valley area. And I went to school down there in Druin, actually, and grew up in Churchill. Churchill's where and my parents still, in fact, live. They're moving to Traralgon.
Oh, there's a big move.
So, yeah. Well,
so, will you be the second most famous person to come out of Druin then?
Well, I think I'd get in trouble if I said I came out of Druin. My parents wouldn't be happy with that.
And, Churchill, renowned for its high education standards. In fact, I know someone who used to teach in Churchill many, many, many years ago.
There you go.
I taught at Kurnai.
Oh, Kurnai, yeah. Okay, I know about Kurnai.
Even before it was called Kurnai. That shows how old I am. But anyway, back to you.
Yeah, there you go.
He's lost. You've thrown the poor boy, of course. Come on, Nathan, focus.
You said I was the second most famous person to come out of Druin, so now I want to know who the first most person.
Well, wasn't it Gary Ablett?
Oh, okay, yes. Well,
and Michael Tuck and Gary Ayres, so you're in amongst good company.
Well, I've got a bit of trivia for you based on Geelong football players a bit later on, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, no. So I grew up. I was born at the Moe Hospital when that existed. And then lived in Morwell for the first 8 years of my life, and then moved to Churchill and was there until I left.
I'm just trying to make a connection between Moe and Australian opera, and it doesn't sort of fit.
A number of different competitions and things I've entered over the years have written Moe-based boy, and and my parents were sitting in the audience in one particular competition, and they were like, they heard this family go, "Oh, I can't believe that boy came from Moe."
I spent the first 2 years of my marriage living in Moe, if you don't mind.
There you go.
Yeah.
That explains a few things.
Yeah. Moccasins on everyone.
Newborough, so she's very clear that it was
upmarket,
not Moe though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that right? Yeah. But no, so anyway.
Yeah, we digress. Get back to the Nathan Lay music story, please.
Digress, but look, I went to school in Druin. I didn't live in Druin. And I was in fact the only VCE. What do they call it now for year 11 and 12 in Victoria? Is it
VCE.
Else?
Yeah.
HSC.
No.
HSC.
No, HSC was in the mid-80s. It's called Victorian Certificate of Education.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's what it was when I was there too. Yeah. So I was the only VCE music student at my school, and so anyway, I got a fair bit of sort of hands-on attention from my teacher there, and I was travelling to Melbourne every week. My parents were driving me up to Melbourne to work with a singing teacher that I'd met through the Latrobe Valley of Stedford. He in fact came down and adjudicated in Stedford, and that's how I met him and got in touch and thought, it might be worth coming to Melbourne to actually work on my voice. But I actually only came to singing pretty late. Late in the scheme of things, I suppose. I started singing when I was about 16, 17 maybe, 16 or 17. But before that, I didn't think it was all that cool. And growing up in the country, it wasn't really looked at in the most, it was a bit of a hard one to have the confidence to do, at least I found. I played plenty of other instruments. I played the drums, I played the trumpet, guitar, and so I had a lot of other musical outlets, that I would pursue. But it took me until, sort of mid to late teens before I had the guts to actually get up and sing, because, you're not just playing an instrument. The instrument is you, so it's a little bit more personal and a little bit more, a little bit harder, I suppose, in a sense, to be able to find that confidence. But it's the kind of thing that's become a little bit easier, I'd say, in recent years, with all these talent competitions and stuff that are kind of normalised singing and made it a really cool thing to do, if you know what I mean.
Well, I do know what you mean, because I do remember a different era, of course, being much older, but I did 1 year of the school choir in Form 1 at Geelong Tech, and peer group pressure banished me to the football ground and cricket nets after that.
That and the fact
which
you
I
can't
regret
sing.
eternally.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that I'm fascinated about is, we've spoken to a few country artists along the way, and we've spoken to one of your colleagues in David Hobson a couple of times.
Oh, yes.
When I
He
was
was on Spicks and Specks last night.
Was he? Did he mention us?
Yes, he did.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. But, when I was growing up, I was going to be a singer one day. And, apart from the fact I couldn't sing was the major stumbling point. But I didn't want to be David Hobson. I didn't want to be Nathan Lay. I certainly didn't want to be Lee Kernaghan. I wanted to be, Mark Knopfler. I wanted to sing proper
Russell
music.
Morris.
Yeah, I wanted to sing proper music. None of this opera crap. How do you get into, is it the style of voice or is it an interest? What's the go?
It's a great question, actually, because when I was young and when I finally did start singing, I didn't want to get into this opera crap either. And that's exactly the kind of thing. I remember when I went to Melbourne to start having these lessons with my teacher at the time, I remember very clearly saying to him that, I'm only wanting to work on this classical technique to improve my singing sort of as a whole and sort of in other styles as well. Because I was still kind of the impression that I wanted to be more like a pop singer or just a different kind of artist or a singer-songwriter or that sort of vibe, which, I did used to do, but and I do still like to think I can do it, except I think training in the operatic or classical style of singing up to the point where I actually became quite good at it, sort of being good at something helps you like it, I suppose, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
We're still looking for something to be good at.
Yeah, and so doing it for years, training and building up a really strong classical technique, I ended up sort of starting to enjoy it. And, any musician who's worth their salt should be able to appreciate any style of music anyway. And so I really think it's just what you're accustomed to. And if you haven't heard much opera or much classical music, then of course you're going to be a little bit more closed-minded to it. But the more you're exposed, the more you sort of grow an ear for it and a taste for it. And so, obviously when you're the one who's training in that area and you're learning all this repertoire and these songs and sort of applying your technique to it to try and improve your voice, it kind of allows you to grow an appreciation for it that perhaps a listener might not if they're not having to go through it. And so in turn, I think you just come to love it. But not to speak for everyone, but I think that's at least how it worked for me. And so once I finished school, I did an audition for various universities and got into the classical voice program. I ended up studying at the Dame Nellie Melba, what's it called? The Conservatorium of Music, Dame Nellie Melba Conservatorium of Music, which no longer exists now. It closed down a few years ago and actually formed into what's now running as the Melba Opera Trust, which is a scholarship program which supports young singers, as they're trying to sort of come up into a career in opera. And it allows them master classes with people that are experts and various visiting artists from overseas and things like that. And it offers money towards singing lessons because it can get really expensive because, obviously if you're having a weekly lesson and you're a student, it can get like ludicrously expensive. So it's that the university that I went to has now become a trust fund, basically, that offers scholarships to developing opera singers.
Different world we're living in now. Are you aware of whether there's plenty of 16-year-old Nathan Lays coming into the system now, following a similar path to you?
Well, I mean, 16-year-old me wasn't an opera singer. 16-year-old me was a promising young musician who realised he had a decent voice and auditioned after my sister begged me to for a local musical in the Gippsland area, and ended up getting the title role. So I played Tevye in a junior production of Fiddler on the Roof, and that kind of, after I did that, I realised, I actually kind of enjoyed that, and so I caught the bug, so to speak. And so I can tell you now, there'll be plenty of young kids. Often it starts in stuff like musicals and community choirs and different things like that. And once you've caught that little bug, it's a hard one to. You sort of don't lose it; it stays with you. And that is, I guess, at least if you're interested in, or that way inclined towards performing. But you'll soon know after you do it.
Well, there's a young fellow sitting to my left who
it's not me, by the way.
No, it's not Neil. It's my other left. He let a little bit of his voice out this morning, and hopefully this conversation with you will inspire him to do a little bit more with that, because there are opportunities around these days to do things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, yes, there definitely are still a lot of young singers that are coming up, and there's no shortage of young opera singers. That's for sure. I can tell you now. You wouldn't know if you weren't in the business, but there definitely are plenty of them out there. What I would say though is that it's getting harder to have a sustainable career in classical music, especially in Australia, where it's a little bit limited. Like there's only there's very few opera companies around, and so it's hard to sort of break into it. Once people know who you are, and if you're doing a decent job, then you have to try and keep the momentum going, I suppose.
Well, Nathan, the song that introduced you this morning is a classic, but it's not classical. So tell us about the pathway to get in to create this album that we're talking about today,
which is called Remembrance, by the way.
Remembrance. Well, look, it first came out back in 2017? I think it was 2017 it was released. We recorded it late 2016. I recorded at a studio called Rock Candy Studios in Melbourne with a friend of mine who produced the album. His name was James Kempster. He's an orchestral contractor and music producer, and a very talented guy, and really good to work with. So he allowed me to sort of get everything to be as I would like. He allowed me to take as many takes until we got it exactly how we wanted it. He was really great. But it all sort of came about because a guy called Robert Rigby, who was at the time working with Sony Music, was also working with James, the producer that I knew. And so I think through their connection and through a couple of other things, like I recorded a performance of All I Ask of You, the duet from Phantom of the Opera, with an artist called Marusha. You may have heard of her, I'm not sure, but she was working with Robert Rigby at the time, and he needed a baritone to sing a duet with her on a recording, and so that was how I met Robert Rigby, by being that baritone to sort of fill the gap there. And then from there we sort of ended up doing this Remembrance album, and I think the brainchild of Robert, and I think a bit of input from myself and James, and we sort of came up with what I think has been quite a great, a really great record. And it was just recently re-released because it was a compilation album initially that had a bunch of songs from a few other artists as well, and 10 of my songs that I'd recorded. But it's just been re-released earlier this year in a physical format. Just with my 10 songs on it, which is nice to have it as sort of more of a standalone thing.
People will know Robert's name, people who have listened to this program, because he's the man who has put us in contact with such luminaries as Jonathan English, because he's doing some work with John English's stuff. He also reintroduced us to Russell Morris. He's doing some work with Russell. Also, Karen Keys, who was in here talking a couple of weeks ago about her book about Jim. And in fact, I was sitting over the cafe table from him enjoying a coffee, and he said, I tell you do need to have a chat too. Have a go at this. I didn't buy your CD. He gave me a copy of it.
Oh, you're lucky.
Payola.
Yeah.
But he said to me, he's a really good fella, but more importantly, he's a really good singer. So I have the album because Robert provided that to me. He's a ripper, and what he's doing for Australian music is fantastic.
Absolutely. And I mean, he's just, some of the people he's worked with is kind of outrageous, actually. Like, he's had such a wonderful career. And so it's lovely to have someone like Robert, who's kind of taken me under his wing to a degree, and he really loves Australian artists and quality Australian voices, and so it's nice to just have his backing and his experience. He really knows what's what in the industry, which is great.
We're talking to Nathan Lay, who is an opera singer with the Australian Opera, which gets the bread and butter, but on a special remembrance album of his at the moment. Nathan, your voice is pure and it's natural. In this day and age, there's a lot of other classical music pieces. Classic music pieces of the pop world that are coming out in different styles and different creations. Have you got an appetite to maybe dabble in some more of this in maybe a different section of the music world? Doing
some other recording, you mean?
Yeah, doing some other covers, if you like, but putting your own stamp on them.
Yeah, look, I mean, recording is something that I love doing. I mean, and I like to think of myself as not strictly an opera singer. I mean, obviously, that is my job, and it's what I've done the most of when it comes to my career. But it all started, and the love of singing and the love of performing for me all started with just loving music in general. And in fact, definitely not opera, because I knew nothing about it, or classical music, in fact, before I started training, in my mid to late teens. And so, I'd love to do some more recording. I have done little bits and bobs of recording of various other things. I've done a couple of original pieces for a group called the Song Tailors. It's a lady who writes songs, and then she sort of commissions various different Australian singers to perform her songs. There's just been a few little bits and pieces that I've recorded. And I have recorded also a German song cycle called Winterreise, which is, I think you can find it on Apple Music, which was just a project I did with a local pianist who lives he lives in Druin, in fact, by the name of Brian Chapman. He's a wonderful pianist and a really a bit of an intellect, and so he's actually he put together an English translation of this song cycle, and we released it as a dual CD that had the English version of this song cycle and also the German version of this song cycle recorded. So, some people might see the English one, some purists might see it as a bit sacrilege, except we really, really think it's quite, especially for English-speaking audiences, it's quite an important and I guess useful thing, so that people, because I think it's so important that people understand what you're singing, and I guess that's one of the downfalls of classical music or of opera, because a lot of opera is obviously in European languages or whatever, and so it's nice to try and make these things more accessible for people. I'm not sure if you've ever been to an opera, but usually when it's in another language, they'll have surtitles so that you can at least follow along and understand what's being said. But yeah, so it was nice to re-record a German song cycle in English as well, but as well do it in the German so that there was, there's both there, so that the purists can be happy as well. But But look, in terms of other recordings, I would love to do some stuff. I'd like to do some maybe slightly more contemporary stuff as well. And I have done a few things like that haven't necessarily been released. But I think it's definitely a bit of easy listening or a bit of stuff like that would be good to do. You may or may not know that I used to be, for a little while, in the Ten Tenors, the Australian group.
So how do you do that if you're a baritone?
Yeah, I know. A lot of people say that to me.
One of our good mates here, Bradley McCaw, is also a former member of the Ten Tenors. So
there you go.
We've had Bradley on a couple of times. We probably should let you go, though, Nathan, because you've kindly given up some of your Saturday morning for us. Can I just say to people that the album is called Remembrance, and it's available on CD by going to greatmusiclivesforever.com. That's the website that has all of the artists that Robert Rigby is working with Ambition Records. You'll certainly find that album there. $30. Can you believe that? $30 and free shipping if you don't mind within Australia. So, $30 total. And it is a great album. It's got 10 tracks on it, ranging from what you would describe as hymns with things like Abide With Me through to the band played Waltzing Matilda, the Wild Colonial Boy, and a couple of, I would call them wartime hits as well, like Pack Up Your Troubles in Your Old Kit Bag. Rob's getting a bit teary here because it takes him back to his childhood.
I'm getting teary for two reasons. I'm just thinking how good Nathan would be doing a cover of some Tom Waits songs or something.
Well, I had him doing Never Mind the Bollocks, it's the Sex Pistols, a remake.
You can't
We're
go
so pretty, oh so pretty.
You can't go without telling us your Geelong football story that you teased us with earlier in the discussion, Nathan.
Yeah, I did tease you with that, didn't I? Well, I mean, you actually started the conversation by...
Yeah, it's his fault.
With Gary Ablett.
Yep.
No, so look, it's kind of relevant because one of my great-grandfathers, his name was Albert Martin Bendel, and he lived in Geelong.
Got a street named after him.
He does indeed. Do you know Bendel Street, do you?
I do indeed, yes.
Yeah, so there you go. So you're putting it together on your own. You don't need me.
Oh, that was the piece of trivia?
Well, that was one of the pieces.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm just trying to find I wrote a couple of things down to tell you because, so he was actually a Geelong City councillor as well at one point. And I know the exact address that he lived at one point in Geelong. It was 10 Meakin Street in East Geelong. So
there's someone who's just fallen over in their kitchen going, that's our address.
I think they have. That's right. I wonder if listening actually lives there now. But
well, if you do, text us on 0488 877 947 and we'll get you in touch with Nathan.
Do it. And he actually, when he, it must have been when he returned from the war, because I think it was in 19, I think it was in 21 or 22 that he played for the Geelong Cats. So I don't know that his career was very long.
No, but Rob remembers him making his debut.
Yeah, I was there. I think he popped up I'm reading a book at the moment, The History of the Geelong Cricket Club, and there was a period where the football and cricket club actually were the one entity, and it was during that period your ancestor's name popped up in council matters as well as playing footy for the Cats. So yeah, a very famous name in the village.
The name. So you know the name already.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Indeed. Nathan, thanks for joining us. We're going to go out with a song also taken from the Remembrance album, your choice. It was called Pyramid's Loneliness. Give us a moment on that.
Yeah, so Pyramid's Loneliness will be a song that probably not anyone knows, and it's an Australian composed piece. Les Coney is the composer, but the piece I actually came across it because I did an opera for Victorian Opera Company with, in fact, David Hobson, which we were talking about.
Friend of the blokes.
And the opera was composed by our artistic director at the time, Richard Mills, and it was called Remembrance. So it was an Anzac. It was for the centenary of Anzac that it was this piece was put together. And so the artistic director who was composing the piece, Richard Mills, he found a few Australian songs to sort of interlace with his composition, and this piece, Pyramid's Loneliness, he found in the State Library archives, and it's a piece that, as far as I'm aware, there's no other recording of it on the planet. It's kind of like it's a forgotten song that just fell into the treasure trove and never to be found again. So it's nice to have actually, immortalised it as such in recording. And it's about Pyramid's Loneliness. It's about a soldier that's basically in Egypt where they trained. The first few lines are he's on the sandy banks of the River Nile sat a soldier boy at eventide, and so he's basically reflecting on various things like people that he misses at home, and so I think I'll let the song speak for itself. But I just think it's a very Australian song, and it's nice to be able to at least sort of bring a bit of awareness to it, because I think it's a really beautiful piece.
Nathan, thank you so much. That was a delightful chat.
Yep, and the album's called Remembrance. You can get it at greatmusiclivesforever.com. We'll chat again.
Thanks for having me.
Good on you, mate.
Nathan.
All the very best.
Nathan Lay.